My name's Chloe Thomas. I'm an e-commerce marketing problem solver, and I am the host of the e-commerce master plan podcast. I'm going to be moderating the questions. Right now, I'd love my three panelists to come up on stage and take their seats. I'll just get out of their way. And then we'll start on the intros. You may notice that we are down to 3 panelists, not 4. That's because, unfortunately, Alexander Bartholomew has not been able to come along today, so we won't have a session after this either. I have threatened the panelists that we may just carry on till 5, but I think that's unlikely. I think we'll still stop at the normal time. So any of you who wanted to stick around for Alexander's session after this, he's not going to be here today, so there won't be anything happening in this theatre then, so you'll need to go elsewhere. All right then. Gentlemen, would you like to just quickly introduce yourselves to the audience, so your name, which company you're from, and also let them know what you think of when you say content marketing? Are we talking video, are we talking text, are we talking image? And Mike, as I'm staring at you, we'll start with you.
Hi, Mike Walwork, currently working for Footasylum. I head up e-commerce. That covers the tech side, front and back end, marketing, social media, so pretty much the full e-com piece. Content to us is very important, and when I talk content, it could mean anything from the written content on the site, video, social, the whole piece, homepage, and just standard e-com piece. So the whole lot, really.
Okay, everything.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Deepak, how about you?
Deepak Anand, I lead the Shopware, who is the leading e-commerce platform. And I work with a lot of retailers and talk about the content strategies because we are working with them on a content and commerce piece. So there is a lot of talks going on between that transactional piece versus the aspirational piece and how you can join together using a technology like ours. So I get invited to a lot of kind of discussions with the retailers and brands and manufacturers and B2B organizations. So it is very important for our clients, very, very important.
Okay, excellent. And Dan?
I'm Dan Mahoney. I'm from Whittard of Chelsea. So I look after 4 things at Whittard, which is customer acquisition, customer retention, customer service, and the web P&L. In terms of content, I think Mike covered it. It is anything that we put out that is to be used as information for the content, from photography through to blogs in all channels and all formats.
Okay, so we have thorough content specialists up here then. No area of content is out of bounds, is what I'm hearing, which has probably just got you all quaking in your boots. Oh God, what's she going to come up with now? Okay, let's start off with a big old question, which is how can content differentiate a retailer? Who's eager to jump in on that one?
I'll go if you like.
Okay.
For us, as a company, we're sort of fiercely proud of what we call our DNA. And our content, be it the written word, be it a piece of video content, be it anything that we put out there, sort of really has to sort of fit that DNA. And it's interesting, it's massively evolving, and for us, it's really important that we keep stopping, checking, and going back to that to say, does it match our DNA and does it go through? But we also have a responsibility to the brands we stock as well, because we do have to sit within their boundaries as well, and it's quite challenging to actually balance all that together as one, to keep your DNA and also with some of the big guys who we're dealing with, your Nikes and your Addies, to actually make sure that all fits into one. But it's really important to just follow that DNA and make sure it goes through.
So essential really as a point of differentiation to have some form of content out there.
100%.
And Deepak, is that what you're finding when you're speaking to different retailers? Are you finding this own brand versus stocked brand dilemma as well?
Most of the conversations I've had with the retailers was all about how they can differentiate using the content, because it used to be just the blog posts, it used to be just the videos, it used to be just the screen ads and all these type of elements. But now, because they wanted to create a similar experience as they walk into the store, provide the relevant content, whether you're buying a £5 item or whether you're buying a £5,000 item. So they just wanted to, the retailers I'm speaking with and engage with, they just wanted to make sure that the content would differentiate amongst other competitors they have in the marketplace. So this is, and also the biggest one is the Amazon. They are competing with them, and they're just saying how exactly using the right content they can differentiate that they're not just a transactional. They want to build the loyalty. They want to build the inspire the customers to have that level of engagement. So a lot of conversations are happening in that.
Mm-hmm. And Dan, your take on using content to differentiate?
Yeah, I think we've spent quite a lot of time on this actually. So we were spinning in circles a little bit at the beginning spending too much time looking at what everybody else was doing and trying to have our own variant of that. And I think we've used content as a vehicle to do two things, I think, probably, which is really define what our brand USP is. So what is our reason to exist? And so to deliver that consistently and vibrantly across all of our content channels. And the other thing is to be useful to customers. I think that's one of the most important things that we've started talking about a lot more is, rather than talking about what we want to talk about, we're trying to talk more about what customers want from us.
So that sounds to me a little bit like two types of content, like Deepak was talking about earlier when you said about, I think it was transactional and aspirational content, that there's kind of like that information piece, and then there's the why buy from us softer piece. Is that something which is, do you have to do both, I guess, in order to differentiate as a retailer, or can you get away with just one of them?
I think years ago you'd try and get away with one. There's no chance you can do it now. I think you've definitely got to differentiate.
Yeah, one thing I heard about a year ago, and it really stuck with me, as e-commerce people, you spend all your time focusing on reducing struggle, making it easy, getting people through the shop. And, and I heard someone talking about, you do want to reduce customer struggle, but you don't want to reduce it to its absolute bare bones, because then you lose the interactivity. You stop customers thinking about you and while they're going through it, even when they're buying something. And I think that's really important as well, is that while you're always focused on your e-commerce 101, your retail, your selling, you want to make sure that there's enough points where the customer does stop to think, why am I here? What am I doing? Am I having a nice time? That crosses physical and digital retail, I think.
And what we have seen working with a lot of retailers in the past, and when we do the analysis, that in terms of the content on the mobile device is different than the content on the desktop, which is kind of a now generic. And also what we are also analyzing, that most of the customers, I don't know about Footasylum and all, they have 6 touch points before they make a purchase. And what we are saying is that working with, as I said, working with a lot of seeing how exactly we can provide the information at every single step, so that at the end you will get the purchase from the customer. So it's basically customers are creating this innovation, what we have seen. And even if we are building our roadmap in the content side of thing, we just see what they want in the next 5 years' time. We are also now in our R&D department thinking about car commerce, IoT, voice commerce. So we are just thinking about sitting in the room and order something from Alexa. Nobody has yet cracked it, so I'm sure it's going to happen in the next few months. So that's I'm waiting for to happen, and we are working very closely with
so all your various answers there have got me thinking that there's almost what the content does, where the content is, and the format the content takes. Is it chicken and egg as to which one comes first, or is there one that you should always start with? Is it the channel you're putting the content in, the message of the content, or the format of the content?
It's interesting. I think
Is anyone willing to answer that?
Yeah, for me it would be message, definitely. So I think distribution comes second in the way that I would think about content. It's really interesting. Deepak talk about a lot of sort of quite exciting technological changes that are happening that we're going to have to adapt to. But on the brand side, the most important thing you need to have is a clear view of what am I going to talk about. Otherwise, you get carried away with, I need an Instagram strategy and I've got to worry about Snapchat, and you're getting dragged in different directions. And if you start with what is it that we're going to talk about, how are we going to be useful, and you can crack that, you can validate it with customers, and they can say, I want to hear about that. Then figuring out how to distribute it and which formats and all that good stuff then flows quite naturally out the back of it, I think.
So it's definitely message first for you.
For me, yes.
Mike?
I think it'd be hard to argue with that, really. I do think the message is really important, but the bit beyond that is understanding who the message is for. And that's the second part of it is, okay, it's great, I've got a message, but who am I aiming the message at? And how's the customer responding? And that sort of shapes your format. Because what you did 6 months ago, what you did 12 months ago, what you did 2 years ago is very different than what you do now, or what you're doing 18 months, 2 years' time from now, because it stops working. So the customers will tell you what they like, because they'll stop looking at it and stop responding. And it's making sure that you're understanding what content you're putting out, what's good, what's bad, and that keep constantly evolving it, is what I'd say.
And that it's integrating both into your planning process is super important. I'm sure we've all done it. I've definitely done it plenty of times where, you've had the photo shoot, you built the content, you're then ready to rock and roll, and then it doesn't fit in a couple of your distribution channels, and you have to start again. So, yeah, being able to think about these things in the creative brief, I think, is super important too.
And we're talking as simple as we want to put something on Facebook. Oh dear, everything's portrait.
Yeah,
we're talking
absolutely.
That simple,
Yeah, absolutely.
We've sort of done it separately, sort of at the moment, Footasylum. So we looked at it, and I had web designers, and we had guys doing stuff because we've got 70 stores, so we had it for the stores as well, and we've got out of home, and we tried the one sort of, we're doing a campaign shoot, and it's very quickly realised that campaign shoot cannot fit all those areas, and that was the challenging bit. So we took the web designers, we took the on-store guys, and we've thrown them all into one team, said you all work together. We're trying to adopt a mobile-first approach or digital-first approach and work it backwards, because if it's good enough for one medium, it's good enough for the rest. And it'd be, in an ideal world, that you'd be able to do your shoot. I get enough for social, I get my short-form content, I get longer videos, I get stuff that I can put on a billboard. It's difficult, it's very difficult, but you have to think that way, and I think that's going to be the future, 100%.
Yeah. And on the technology front, how we are working together is basically thinking about how we can, personalization is, I think it's an old buzzword. In 2010, we used to use that. And I'm thinking about the machine learning, which is coming up in the play, and we are just saying how we can combine the commerce and the content piece. That is one thing which I'm kind of very excited about working with retailers to talk about their both strategies, because you can have millions, now the data is available, the content is available, you can write content, there is a user-generated content, there's so much content, but how you can just, as mentioned, is how you can use that to optimize. And I think one thing which I'm still working with the retailers to find out what exactly they want, the outcome of the entire process. Do they want a sale? Do they want engagement, loyalty, or do they want a long-term relationship with a customer? So if that is not clear, you can create. But if you look at the transaction, this is exactly where I'm coming back again. If you just look at the smaller transaction, you might lose the engagement which you have for a longer time. So.
Okay, I have a huge stack of questions that these guys have inspired in my head just so far, but I'm going to throw it out to the guys in the audience right now. Does anyone have any questions they want to ask of our panel? But yeah, hands up and we'll get a microphone to you. There's one down here, so I'll run. So we're down to just the one mic right now.
So you were talking about content-rich websites. So how important would you say buying guides are for customers?
Sorry, say that again. Buying guides?
Buying guides, so to inform customers why they need a product, explaining the uses of it. So just sort of eliminating any doubt that a customer may have in their mind about a product.
So I come mainly from a fashion background, and I think it's less important than, say, you came from an electrical or a technical product background. I think it depends on what you're trying to sell or what service you're trying to sell. I think it massively depends on what you're actually putting out there. So if someone wants the latest Nike trainers off us, there's a pretty good chance they know all about them and they can't wait for them to land. If I wanted a TV, personally, if I went to buy a TV, I'd probably do quite a lot of research and want a lot of information and look at ratings, reviews and technical information, personally.
I would say, unfortunately, I think we have the wrong retailers up here to ask that question of, because tea and footwear are not quite the cool ones for buying guys. But I think possibly is the answer is that it depends on the product, and if that's what the customer needs, that's what the customer needs.
Absolutely. I mean, because we work with a lot of B2B, and the content is, when I look at what exactly the stakeholders are looking for, I mean, this is on the top. They just say that because B2B transactions are generally thousands of job pounds, and they want to provide every single detailed information to their traders or to their buyers. So for them, content is very, very important, whether it's buying guide or how to install and all these type of things. But it is becoming the super important for most of the manufacturers right now. But as I said, for luxury it's different, for transaction, utility, commodity is different, and for B2B is completely different.
The thing I'd add to that is just for anything like that is test it. Yeah. Just test it. You'll know, because if people are clicking on it and people are using it, then they want it. If they're not, then you'll know.
Yeah, I mean, I'd probably sort of say the concept of a buying guide, absolutely. I don't know whether it needs to be an actual thing. You need to try and make your website work in a way that it provides the same end result. So it's where and how you tee up information. So I think like tea is quite a complex product category. So I've come from a clothing fashion background, and it's visually it's easier to bring a product to life. If I'm selling dresses, you can see them. If you're selling 20 different black teas, it's quite difficult to understand why they're different or how to choose. So you need to be able to flow information up in front of the customer to help them figure out what's beneath the door. And I think the concept of a buying guide should exist for anyone trying to sell stuff online. It's how you get your information in the right places on the website. It's information architecture.
Interestingly, in our first session today, for those of you who weren't here, we had Bruce from Brand Alley who was saying the number one thing his customers want is the right information in order to get their products. I can see there's a question at the back. I will come to you next. But just before then, you may have noticed we've got another person on stage with us. Hello, Nick. How are you doing?
Yeah, very good, thanks.
And you've come on at just the right time.
Yep.
So everybody, I've got the wrong page. It's Nick Wilsden, who's the SEO lead at Vodafone. And we just had a question about the importance of the buying guide. Now, probably quite relevant in the world of Vodafone, the buying guide?
Absolutely. I mean, these are sort of cornerstone pieces of content. So I think the difficulty with these kind of pieces for us at Vodafone is maintaining them, because we have kind of product pieces and product copy, but then we want to create buying guides because we know that creates the incremental volume. Because when you have a domain that has a lot of authority like Vodafone, any content we put out generates a huge amount of traffic. But then, of course, it comes to the issues are really surrounding how do you maintain that content and keep it up to date.
I think it's interesting you said about cornerstone content. Does that feature in anyone else's strategy in the content world? Or is it not a distinction that you
we
made?
use the term evergreen, but it's the same thing. Yeah, absolutely. And going back a year or so, we were kind of saying we were building lots of whizzy content, to a campaign or something that was happening in the market, and we didn't have any cornerstone content. We didn't have any evergreen stuff, and that's what's going to A, help your customers, B, drive your SEO. That should be the heart of what you do, and so we had to revitalise that whole bit.
And it's very hard to kind of convince the management really to let you do that. I think we recently, if you look on the Vodafone UK site, we did some really good buying guides for the iPhones. And historically, Apple just won't let you write anything off script about their devices. But we got away with a whole comparison section, which basically looks, and you find if you go to the sitemap, iPhone 6 versus iPhone 8, and they were so impressed with the use of AMP content, accelerated mobile content, that they let us kind of go off road and create buying guides. So it's, but they've done amazingly well. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, I think we've exhausted the buying guides. We have the gentleman at the back with the next question.
Thank you. Mike, I was just wondering, you're talking about DNA. If you work in a sector where there's a lot of competition, how do you differentiate yourself from your competitors if your products are the same or similar? I mean, how do you do that?
So through content, written content as in how we would actually describe things or some of the key hookups or strap lines that we'd use, that's one way we would do it. And it's certainly through the way we'd communicate to the customer, through the way we shoot things. So we'll shoot something very different on a different model. We might shoot a garment that a competitor might shoot very mainstream. We might shoot it very urban. We might get grime artists, rappers, people like that involved. We've done shoots where we've had sort of around the Euros, we had shoots where we had sort of flares going off and all sorts of stuff, and we try and really push the boundaries as far as we can. And we believe that that's sort of how we can sort of get our DNA through. But it's difficult because there are a lot of smaller brands that are coming through now that are doing very similar things. So it's constantly, again, as I said earlier, keep trying to evolve it, because you can't say, this is us, this is our DNA, and this is what our content looks like. That's a snapshot. And you've just got to keep moving that content on, keep it interesting, keep it fresh.
We've talked quite a bit about the timescales of content production in a not directly but generalistically here about how we're doing photo shoots that then get changed and we're working on campaigns. How long you when you've got to keep things up to date, how long do you spend from idea to actual implementation? What's your average? Just for those out there who are thinking they have to turn this around in a week or a day, or thinking they've got a year, what's your rough numbers?
We've turned things around really quickly. We have to at times. If certain product hits us, we can do a good campaign, and we can turn it around in a week. But that sort of kills everything because it's drop everything and that's the job. But we try and actually plan it in a lot better and spread it out. But we can do it. Some things will take a lot longer. It just depends what we're working on. But to be fair, there's a lot of content that you can get now. It depends where you're going. But for social, you don't need massive production crews. You can turn around and get some really cool content with just a couple of people. And actually just get it to market and get it out there, be it whichever channel it is, really quickly.
I think it's about ideas, definitely ideas, and you can come up with some really creative ideas that are very easy to implement. I think for the new, I think it was the iPhone 6, we just sent 2 people out in London to create a music video with the iPhone 6, and they did all the shooting, the cutting, the editing, everything on the device, and they had a huge amount of fun. But that was sort of 2 days' work for them. So I think it very much depends, what the objectives are and how we do ideas.
It's worth pulling out all the stops when it's necessary. Dan, do you have a timetable you're running to, or is it similar? It depends on the idea.
Yeah, it does. I mean, I think we're trying to take a bit more of a brand mentality into a retail environment. Brands are planning content 18, 24 months ahead of time, and so not that we are, but that's where we'd like to be. And I think if you're planning content that you're not going to regret planning, i.e. it's not time sensitive, it's not about a product that might drop in and out or not be important. It's cornerstone, evergreen, this is who we are, type campaign content, then that's always going to exist and that's always going to be wonderful because you planned it so well. And it also then gives you space to respond to the Monday morning, oh my God, what happened last week? We've got to be reactive, or something's happening in the market, a product's coming in at short notice. But if everything's quick turnaround, you're not going to evolve over time. You've got to find the balance, I think.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Especially when you're dealing with sort of more professional content parts of the business, the PR, the people who are used to a sort of grid and a way of doing things. And if you're coming at that from sort of the SEO department, you get your best results by fitting in with how they work. So you do have a much longer time frame. You can't say sort of jump into everything.
And from just to add here, because one of our clients I'm working with is My Wallet, and they're launching in 23 countries. And the challenge I saw there was the content which will work in the UK will not going to work same in the other countries. And you can have that strategy. I don't know whether you face the same challenge around UK content might not work in Germany, or so how the translation is one piece, but the way the culture and the behavior of the user. So it took us a long time just to make them understand. From technology perspective, it works on Shopware, there's no problem, but it's just about the mindset, how exactly that will differentiate in different markets. You can't just piece one content and just say you can translate and everything would be the same. We've had
very much that problem. And, and the interesting thing, I think, from my perspective, though, is how little sharing that we had between markets. So people would create content over and over again, create assets over and over again. And something that we did from very simple kind of way is just sharing those assets, having a library where different markets can kind of take those Photoshop files and then they say sort of do something local with them. So do the local translation, work out what the local spin was on that story, or even if it wasn't going to work, but at least sharing the assets. And I think a lot of sort of large organisations don't do that, and it seemed to me quite when you're working with so many different agencies, and we've got some 11 to 15 agencies, just getting to share their work was an amazing cost saving.
That's a nice point, actually, that you're making right at the end. There's content sharing by market, but also agencies is really important as well. And if you've not got everything under one hood, it's finding the right ways to get everybody in the same room. So you're working off the same page. I think that's super. I've seen some success with that.
And I think that's kind of led to the need to have content people centrally within organisations. I think it's very hard to do that just with externals. You need the people who kind of connect all the dots within the company.
And if you've got agencies that don't want to talk to each other, you maybe haven't got the right agencies as well. I think that was the learning I had at some point. So
definitely true.
Do we have another question from the audience? Oh, yes, we've got... actually, I'll move. It's okay. You're closer to me.
Sorry, you might be repeating what you mentioned earlier about DNA, Mike, but when a company has such a strong DNA and brand values, when creating local content for the UK market, if, for example, those DNA and values don't necessarily resonate immediately with the UK market, how do you go around keeping those core DNA values, but at the same time creating content that is relevant to the UK user?
So for us, effectively, because we produce all our own stuff, or as much as we possibly can, it allows us to sort of keep it relevant. In terms of the product, it will be the product. You'd think that the buying team will get that right, and that's their job to get it right, that the product should fit that market. And if the product fits the market, we can make the content fit. So typically, we should be okay. That's where I look at it. We're not massively producing content for international market at this moment in time. It's something that's definitely something that we'd look at. But for the UK, I think we've got it fairly nailed, and that's where I'd see it. I hope that makes sense. So, yeah. How do we make it relevant for the UK then?
Okay, for those of you who didn't hear that, because I didn't move and give the mic to the question answerer, she's saying it's kind of the other way around. If you're a very, very strong international brand, how do you localise for the UK market without detracting? Yeah.
For me, I'd definitely look at it. Look, for me personally, for fashion, I'd look at the model choice, the location, and all that side of it. And I think that's what's going to give you the UK feel if I was shooting. That's how I'd go about it. And it's sort of the language you use as well. Again, it's the language that you use and the strap lines that you will put onto your campaign or your lockups. Even that will give you a little bit of a feel. And even as daft as it sounds, the weather, because that actually makes a difference. If it's sort of beaming out, outside, it doesn't look very sort of local, especially if you're from Manchester like myself.
A great example of a company who did that by controlling aspects of the content and allowing localization of parts of the content. Everyone remember the MasterCard ads, you know, with the voiceovers about how this is brilliant, and I've forgotten how the adverts go. But basically, they had certain shots through the advert which everybody had to use wherever they were in the world, but then they had bits in between that you could localize to create the local nuances. Yeah. And that's probably one of the best examples of how to allow freedom whilst maintaining control, which I think is the challenge.
I think Disney as well were someone I always really respected in that area. They do an absolute masterclass of, you know, when Frozen is released. Frozen is a massive success in every single country because they go into those markets, they pick up the local stars to do the voiceovers, so that they're doing all the marketing. The whole formula is based on local talent. So they pick people who resonate with that audience, with those children. So it's you know, follow what they're doing to see how they kind of, you know, take an idea or a film and then launch it across multiple markets. It's brilliant.
Okay, we have another question at the back.
Hi, yeah, you mentioned about content, serving the right content at the right point of the journey. I'm interested to get your thoughts and value on what content should be like and shape for post-purchase. Content is typically kind of acquisition and inspiration, but that kind of emotional piece before I've physically received my goods, what's the role of content there, and what would that mean to you as brands? Either is it a technical piece of content because, you know, Mike, you've bought a TV and you want to know how to put it together, or is it an inspirational, aspirational, emotional piece?
Excellent question. Who wants to talk post-purchase content?
Yeah, I'd say for me it's support. It's making people feel very happy that they bought that product, so supporting them in that purchase. And certainly, you know, buy any kind of tool, buy any kind of device from Apple, and you'll get a masterclass in the content process. They'll take you through, you know, they're waiting for the product delivery, post purchase. You then get a session, an optional session with a support person to help you through it, help you get it set up, and it is kind of inspirational in a way because they want to make you feel very happy with the thing that you purchased. So it's almost you're reinforcing those messages that they had pre-purchase, post-purchase to sort of say this was a fantastic buy. You know, you've made a really good step.
So I also we also work with the retailers, and this is one of the strategies we follow in terms of how exactly you can provide, when we talk about inspirational aspiration, how exactly you can provide the level of support after they buy an item. So that's one of the elements we cover during our sessions, because you can make a transaction, then after that you can just forget about it, and then you can just move to another transaction. But what we do with most of the retailers is sit down and just think about their overall journey, and then thinking about how you can just keep on inspiring them. Because buying an item for £5 or £50 or £500, there are different elements to that. But we work with retailers and talk about that, how they can just support through different marketing strategies, make sure that they get a right level of support afterwards. Because after service will define whether they're going to be sticking around with you for a long time, or it's just going to be moving away. So that's what.
I've heard it kind of likened a bit to the kind of that relationship and that one night stand. We focus exclusively on the pickup lines, on the getting that person, meeting them, and then in the morning, is it an awkward kind of goodbye and parting? That's obviously, you want to keep that relationship going, because you want that person to come back and you want them to be loyal to the brand. So it's
Mike, any thoughts on post-purchase campaigns?
Yeah, I mean, it is the bit where, for me, it's the next contact you have with them. So after we're going to deliver something, it gets delivered, and you do the thing, there's a bit in between, which if you do it the right way, so I worked for a while in sort of high-end women's sort of handbags, shoes, etc. And it was a beautiful packaging, handwritten note, the nice tissue paper, and that type of thing. That's not content, but it is. And that for me is amazing, that when you open it and you've opened a gift to yourself, and it was almost like a congratulations. We've had it where in the box it's had a nice little note inside, quotes from famous people, aspirational things. That's part of the content, but then it's the not hitting someone the next day with an email going, come and buy something, we're about to go and say we're doing this. It's the giving them a bit of breathing space, and knowing from everything that I buy, some people don't respect that, and I think that not enough, and I'm not saying we're brilliant at it, but I think more retailers need to have a think about, someone just bought from you, give them a moment, and actually then ease them back into the next purchase or that conversational piece.
Oh, but to play devil's advocate, in the mail order world, that bounce back catalogue that comes out with the product, God, that's a ROI beauty.
And I've lived in that land as well.
Dan, any thoughts on post-purchase?
Yeah, I think it's content that drives content is what we tend to focus on. So trying to get some UGC, trying to get something back from the customer and engagement. So whether that's a review or an Instagram post or Facebook interaction, ideally a customer referral, the absolute creme de la creme of acquisition marketing. So it's, if you give them that wow experience, talks about in the box, if that in the box experience is wow, if the post-purchase comms are wow, can you then lean on the customer to talk about you a little bit? Can you start someone else's journey? Can they give you a bit of referral marketing? And that's what we're super focused on. That, and to come and see us in person. Actually come in, that's the multi-channel bit, is you bought from us online, we want to meet you, we want you to come into our stores, which is the best representation of our brand bar none. So, yeah.
Well, we made it 35 minutes before mentioning UGC, user-generated content, which, if anyone was sweepstaking that was the outlying result. We had a lady in a checked shirt, checked coat there, who was after a question. You still after a question? Yep. And then there was someone with their hand up just here at the front. Cool.
Thank you. It might be a bit difficult to answer because of the nature of the companies, but I wondered, for somebody like myself who's not long started out, so I'm a one-man band, content is something that I'm driving online, both aspirationally and transactionally, to try and obviously do what I can. But I wondered if any of you might be able to share any tips or tactics in terms of actually monetizing that content. That content that sort of generates somebody to go, yeah, I'm going to buy. That tips them over the edge. For somebody who doesn't advertise that much because you're really still quite small and you're still trying to build that reception. So I wondered if any new product trials or, launches that might have been kept quite secret until you've actually come out to the market. If there was any tips or tactics you might be able to share. Does that make sense?
I think what you're asking is, what is the $1 million most important piece of content to get the sale, isn't it? Is that right?
Well,
it's a good question.
Kind of. Obviously, if we had a crystal ball, it'd be great. But it's just if there's any tips or tactics from their experiences, because they just might be helpful.
Okay, guys, top tips to secure that sale. Who wants to go first? Oh, the thinking caps are on,
Yeah,
aren't they? What
smell
can we give away? What aren't we willing to give away?
Well, give away. I'm just trying to find a good answer to
Yeah.
that. It's a difficult question.
Well, whilst you're all thinking, I would say social proof is always a good thing to add into content if you're trying to make sure you get the sale, especially when you're new. You know, to show that other people trust you, that other magazines have featured you, you know, to show that other people have bought successfully from you. That's really important when you're trying to get the sales in the early days, especially. Guys, has anyone got an answer yet?
So I can
Go for it,
start about
Deepak.
this. So I think what exactly the challenge I face with a few of the retailers, not a lot of them, is the outcome is not clear. Whether you want a short-term game, as you mentioned about one night stand, or you want a long-term relationship. So you really have to be very, very clear in terms of what do you want. You want the engagement, you want loyalty, or you just want to have a transaction. But this is my belief, if you just keep on thinking about the transaction, you're not going to be there in the next 10 years. Amazon will eat your business, and you'll just be thinking about this. So I would rather think about the worst situation you will be in, where you are thinking about, I want to do engagement, but I want to sell. I want to sell hundreds of items every minute, but I want to have an engagement. This is the worst situation. Either you can just think about one side or commodity or utility. This is just my opinion on that, because if I work with a number of luxury brands, and so they just need to make sure that they have the right balance. So clarity is the ice power, I think. You need to make sure the outcome is clear. What do you want to do in the next 5 years or 3 years?
Yeah, I think if you're small, the exciting thing is you can control your destiny. You haven't got the process and the rigmarole to go through to produce a piece of content. If you've got customers already, meet them, speak to them, ask them. That's the best way to understand what content you should be producing. People that have bought from you, why did they buy? What drove their purchase? What piece of content jumped off the shelf? What would they need next time to come back? That's the best way to understand which content to build, is to ask your customers, whether that's digitally or ideally in person.
Yeah, I mean, a real common mistake I see is that small brands want to act like big brands, and I understand where you're coming from that, but it doesn't really make sense. As a small brand, you have this advantage that people will buy into you, they'll buy into your story, and they'll buy into you in a much deeper way than you would into a larger brand.
Yeah.
So just make sure that kind of, that backstory's there, that reason's there, why you started this business, what was important about you in starting this business. I'm sure more
Cornerstone
content again. It's a lot of these businesses kind of do this very well. I've been buying a lot of food from Piper's Farm.
Yeah.
It's going to drop things, but this kind of it's an organic farm.
Me too, yeah.
You all go there,
Yeah.
and it's an organic farm. They give you the backstory about why they've got a different way of producing food. Why it's more important to them to look after animals, and you kind of really buy into this backstory, and I think that's what you can do as a small company. And that will get the return visits and allow you to have a much closer relationship with your customers.
So in a practical sense, we're talking good about us page.
Good about us
clear.
pages, like you say, customer testimonials really important.
Yeah. Make it human.
Make it human.
Nice welcome email.
Don't try and be this kind of amorphous corporate brand, because you're not gaining anything by imitating the large brands in that way.
And actually, all the large brands are trying to create a one-on-one relationship with their customer anyway. So you're actually in a better position. We had a lady just down here, second row, who was after a question.
Hi, hello. So you guys have talked a lot about content in terms of how it might promote your products, your brand, convey your messages to your customers. How much of content should be about your customers rather than about your brand? So Dan, you mentioned something about content being useful. I don't know if you meant it in that way. So just an example that I thought of in the top of my head, someone like Whole Food, obviously they're a supermarket, but content that they can produce might be cooking recipes or like on healthy food that probably has nothing to do directly with any of their products, but is useful. So how much of content should be about your brand, your product, promoting that, versus something that's just what you're providing to your customers, but that builds up the loyalty and the trust, and they don't think that you're always pushing products in their face, basically.
Yeah, it's a nice question. I think don't make assumptions would be the first one. So your example is a really good one actually for us. So we've created a lot of content for recipes, how you can use pairings, how you can use tea leaves for cooking as well as for drinking. And then recently in a customer focus group, we found out that yeah, it's all right, but that's not what we want from you. We want you to explain more about where your product's produced, who the people are involved. We want you to bring your store teams to life. We want to understand more about how to brew loose leaf tea, which you assume we all know, and actually we don't. And I think that comes back to the point I was making a minute ago is, don't assume, just ask your customers what they want. That's the, there is no answer to what it should be until they tell you. And I think that's what we're trying to do more and more, is ask customers what they want, put things out, validate that, they didn't just think they wanted it, that they actually wanted it. But yeah, being more lifestyle is super important into that, and sort of thinking about your product in a, how people are using it at home and the environment they're in, so you can bring it to life in a slightly different way. And that's asking customers. I think the other thing that's important is use search data, use Google. Every day people are searching for thousands of things. Where are we not playing? Where are those little white spots where we can produce a bit of content because people are asking for it? They're not necessarily asking us, but they're asking the world. They're asking the sector, and no one owns it.
Yeah, so on that point, there's if you get a chance to go to a website, answerthepublic.com. It's one that we often kind of use in presentations, but you'll get a lot of data from Google in terms of what questions people are asking, the how, why, what, where. So go and have a look at that and see exactly, as I say, what people want. Yeah.
Anyone else anything on that question, or should we go back to the audience? We're good. We've got a hand straight up before I even ask there, so we better come to you, sir.
First of all, I've got to exclude Nick from answering this for fairly obvious reasons, or reasons that will become obvious. Gentlemen, how does content intersect with the opportunities which will become apparent through voice search?
You got this?
Stunned silence.
Yeah, content. For us, I mean, we don't know. For me personally, I think it's going to be something that is going to come. It's going to be big. How big it's going to be and where it's going to land, who knows? I think it's going to be important, but I don't know enough about it to sort of speak with any sort of authority whatsoever, in all honesty. I think that's why I'll be on it. Yeah,
so I think for we sell tea, so we're not going to lead the front on voice search. We're going to leave that to pure plays and technology guys to show us how to do it well. And then we might have a dabble, but I think that's probably a little way off, because there's so many things closer to home with regards to content, relevant information, using analytical merchandising for presenting content that we're still not doing. That voice search doesn't feel in the moment for me yet, and definitely don't need to lead it. So.
Okay, Nick, you can have a go now.
I like I've been excluded.
No, you can nail it.
Obviously we do a lot with voice search. So I think it is an emerging tech, and there's a lot of people doing voice searches. We've got 75% coverage now for Amazon in the house, so it's kind of, we're getting more rapid adoption than smartphones. And I think in terms of producing content for voice search, it's an incredibly interesting area. I think we have featured snippets in Google at the moment, so we're calling them position 0. So when we have the normal results, we have above that, we have a box from Google where they're trying to pick the definitive answer to that question. And where that would be interesting is and obviously they're trying to pick this for the reason that they want to use this in the result for voice search. So when we're talking about kind of brewing loose leaf tea, I'd initially kind of go after that as a featured snippet, get the content, get that as a featured snippet, and then have that as the #1 answer on Alexa when someone's querying their Google Home device, which then brings kind of brand recognition back into it, which would be quite useful. I think we've got to see where. I'm also a massive fan, of Alexa skills, so I'm sort of seeing them being used increasingly for e-commerce, and I think a lot of the content that we'll have on Alexa skills will be how to make the process more useful for the customers, and it's really about increasing convenience. So the content will be, where is my goods, when are they being delivered, what are the sale items. There'll be a lot of content we can produce just to make life easier, really, for people.
From the technology perspective, what we look at is how exactly you would be able to search everything through voice. So the way we kind of build our roadmap is to look at all these elements from the Shopware Labs side of thing, where we can just see all the content which you have built on our technology can be read by all the devices. So that's our future. That's what we are doing right now.
Okay, we're going to have to end it on the subject of voice search. So a huge thank you to my panelists, to Mike, Deepak, Dan and Nick.